Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. This evening, 12 April, you're going to be stuck with us. We're going to be working on a kind of a different tying system. We call it the tie wrap. And we have a couple of tips tonight on hooks and some hints. We'll get to that. Anyway, we're the Beattys from Boise, Idaho, and I'm sure glad to have my partner back beside me in the garden and at the fly tying station. But anyway, let's jump right into the program tonight. The tie wrap system. Well, what is it? It's a method of anchoring your materials, which I'm sure when you see it, every one of you have used it in one form or another. Maybe not exactly the way I'm going to use it, but you've seen it. And it's also the most important part of it is waste management. And it's not the trucks that go down the street gathering the refuse from your home we're talking about. This is waste management on your fly, and use of waste or hiding the waste can make a fly look great, and having it in the wrong spot can make a fly look pretty bad. Anyway, back here, and let's get started. I guess this is not exactly a tying flies program. However, I'm going to partly construct a couple of flies, but this is mainly just to share a technique that Gretchen and I have been playing with for the better part of the time we've been married, and really kind of finalized it in just the last couple of years, to the point where we felt that it was worth bringing to you all now. It seems to be working for us. But let's start by moving over to the vice camera, and I've got a parachute in there, and the only reason it's there is the last fly that we're going to tie tonight is a parachute. So, but let me get that out of there, because we always like to take a look at where we're going. And I'm going to start with that right now by putting this hook in the vise. All right. Now what we have here is what appears to be two applications of hackle that's on the same hook. All we're trying to do is provide information. But I want you to notice right here, the one at the back is tied traditionally. You can see if I move my pointer right there, in fact, if I put it behind, you can see that stub sticking up where you tied off the hackle. Now, understand, I left that stub longer than most of us do, but when you tie off a stub, then you have to wrap thread over it to make the head. And we're going to pretend that that little application of hackle there is at the front of a hook. On the other hand, look at the back of this, the one in front of it. No stub there. Look at the front. No stub there. And that's what we're going to show you tonight, is how to tie so that you are managing that stub, that waste management we talked about. Well, that's what we're going to be working on. Now, let me show you a couple of other applications where it works pretty well, so you kind of get an idea. Here is an application of peacock. And you can see you can't find a place where it's tied down in front or in back. And that's probably as good an example, at least up close, like Gretchen just provided for you. And let's go to another place where it's very useful. Now here's one I just did this with the softest hackled rooster feather I could find. And again, there's the back of the application. And there's the front of the application. And the only thing you can see sticking out there is where I left the thread too long when I cut it. So that's what our head would be. Well, let me go to the last one before we get into actually tying and showing you how it goes together. I got one more here. And this is just a wet collar application. And that's not going to work on that one, Gretch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, okay. And as you can see on that one, we've got a nice clean head. No waste sticking out there anywhere. We just nice clean head. So we're going to get into tying that right now. And let me get my first mock-up out. In fact, what I want to do is I am going to just show you a technique that we've often used in the past. And then I'm going to show you the way we do it now. But we often tied flies, and in fact, I have one of the, what is it, the bronze, the woolly bugger, and then there's an elk hair caddis. Anyway, where the hackle is tied on at the front and wrapped to the back. So on this particular situation, there's no waist here to have to worry about. And we'll just wrap to the back. And when we reach the back of the hook, we tie off there. And yeah, there's some waste back there. And often we can kind of camouflage it a little bit. And we can just work our way forward. And we've done this for, I don't know, I did this before we ever got married. So I've been doing it for 40 years, give or take. And that makes a pretty clean application. But not everything can work out to do that. So I'm going to just tie that off real quick, and then we'll move into this other way of doing it here. Okay, I have a fly partially constructed, and I'm going to step away from the roll of the tie wrap system for just a moment and ask you all a question. The fly that I'm going to tie comes from this book right here, Flies of the Northwest. And on page 6, at the bottom, it's the Colzer Dark Caddis. And it's a hairwing fly, and it's got palmered hackle in the body and then a full hackle up front. Well, there are several flies that I've seen that really resemble that. In fact, there's a catskill pattern called the beaver kill, and it's tied a lot that way. It has quill wings rather than hair wings. And of course, the one I'm going to do tonight is going to have wonder wings. But I would really appreciate, I think there's 3 or 4 more flies like the one I'm going to try tonight out there. I would like to know what the names are so I can get them on my list so that I can reference to the different things, because the Colzer one is from the 1950s, and I'd be willing to bet that catskill one is probably even earlier than that. But I'm just trying to get a sense of some of the history. Anyway, back here, what I've done is I've attached my wonder wings. I've attached a hackle at the back, and instead of dubbing, I'm using yarn. For some of you joining tonight that have trouble with dubbing, I'm going to show you an alternative that can work. However, Gretchen is over here kicking me on the shins right now because I happen to be in the dubbing making business, and I'm telling you how to not use it. It's probably not the smartest business move I've ever made. Anyway, let's get here. We'll stand these wings up just a little bit, pull them apart, and let's get rid of the waste. And that's not waste. What that is the next fly. And because it's going to be the next fly, I'm going to put those 2 feathers in a clip so I don't lose them, because I'll need them for the one we're going to do next. Looks like I got a wild one right there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is to move forward right to there, right about where I want the head to be. And I am going to take, what this is a strand, a 4-strand, inexpensive red heart yarn that you buy at Walmart. And it's got 4 strands in it, and I've already pulled some out. And the way you make this stuff go on the hook looking really nice is you understand there's kinks there, but you can twist this until you can almost see the fibers line up straight. This way they're all kinked up, and that way they're all lined up straight. And you just start wrapping that as if it were a piece of floss, making sure you keep those fibers straight. All right. And give it after each turn, you have to give it a little twist one way or the other to keep those fibers nice and straight. Okay. And we'll do a couple of turns in front here and just tie that off. I want to give plenty of room there for our hackle application that we're going to be working with. All right. Now I'm going to advance the hackle forward to finish the fly. And we palmer the hackle over the body area until we get to the area that traditionally has a heavier hackle, and we just increase the number of turns or put the turns a little closer together. And if this were tied Catskill style, of course, they wouldn't be nearly as heavy as they are right now. And now I come up to the point where I normally tie it off. And I'm going to stop for a moment and put on a hackle pliers just to keep it from coming undone. Because we need to talk about how we're going to handle this waste, because normally what we do is we pull this forward, we wrap over it a couple of times, and then when you trim the feather is sticking forward just like it did on this one that I showed you just a few minutes ago. And you have a stump sticking up there that you have to hide somewhere in your head. What I'm going to do now is talk about the front side of the thread and the back side. And I know you can't see any difference, but you can see I have something in front, my pointer in front of the thread, and now you can see that the thread is in front of the pointer. This is the back side of the thread, this is the front side of the thread, and the front side is what touches the hook. Okay, now just remember that, because we need to remember which direction we're wrapping. Now the second thing is we want to hide our waste. So what I'm going to do now is take 2 turns of the feather around the thread, not the other way around, just like that. Now I am going to wrap the 2 together until it gets up on top and I can pull off the hackle pliers. And what we have here now is a tied off feather, one wild barb there. That's the stub is hidden back in the application rather than forward into the head. So let me just cut off the feather, and I'm going to cut off the feather by breaking the stem, not by cutting it, because I want to leave those fibers there to cover it up. Now I'm just going to go ahead and finish the fly with about 3 turns, a 3-turn head, put on a whip finish. And I'll cut the thread. And there we have a nice dry fly with a nice head. And it don't really make a heck of a lot of difference when you're dealing with a size 12. But the shaft in a number 18 or 20 feather isn't too much smaller than the one on a 12. I mean, there's a difference, of course, but not much as in comparison to the size of the fly that you're tying. But I just showed you, don't make a lot of difference on a 12. It makes a lot of difference on a size 18 or a 20. Okay, any questions before we go on to the next?
So, Al, wouldn't the rachis be sticking out the bottom like that?
The way it is, it's going around and around the thread. Hackle application here, head in front, rachis is going that way.
So
it
points it back into the body of the hackle.
Into the hackle. What we're going to do on the next one, in fact, what I've got set up here is I'll set up and just wrap a hackle and show you another way of making the same thing happen.
So you talked about the front of the thread and the back of the thread. What is the significance? You could talk about that?
Yeah, that's very significant because the front of the thread touches the hook. The back of the thread faces the fly tire. So it's very important when you start figuring out which way you need to have the stub hiding. Because if I wrap my hackle the other way, it would point out, make a worse mess than what we do the way we tie off now. In fact, if you want, I'll just take a minute.
And you need to do that one more time because we need to do it. We need to do it zoomed in.
Oh, okay, let me get another hook in here.
Because I don't think you could see, and talk through it a little bit, okay?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I was wondering how many, I think you said you wrapped the feather around the thread twice. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
Let me just get I've got some gray here. I got this same feather. I'll just go ahead and tie it on. All right, let me just wrap my hackle. Okay. What we need to do is we need to come around and over, behind, in front, back around again, behind, in front, and that has us set up for the stub end.
Undo that and do that again, would you?
All right.
Yeah, do it again.
Because I lost you, so I'm sure they did too.
Okay.
Well, maybe not.
Okay. We need to wrap so that we know it's going to end up pointing into the application. If you go the other way, I'll show you what happens. It points out that way, and you end up with a stub out that way. You want your stub pointing in.
So that first wrap comes in front towards the eye,
front and
that forces it back in that direction is what we're
back in that
saying.
direction, right?
Okay.
Now the other thing, and I'm not doing it tonight, but I've done it on quite a few flies, is I put just a little drop of healthy hoof or head cement or whatever, and now you can see I've got two turns, and the direction it's going to get locked in, pointed in the direction of my scissor points. So let me just wrap over that. It's all anchored down. It's held down by two turns of thread, just like we normally do. And I'll just come forward.
And the thing I want to point out that just flummoxed me when he first showed me this and we started doing it is I figured that this hackle here, let's see, right in here where he wrapped would go bonkers. But as you notice, when he started wrapping the whole thing over, that hackle just stood up as part of the hackle. It was, and I couldn't believe that was happening, but
I'm finding it's just as strong. And of course, if you put a drop of glue,
whoops,
we're too close, stretching. If you put a drop, just put a little stroke of glue right there on the thread where you wrap the feather around, and then you go ahead and wrap and finish off your head. You got it.
So
now, how many?
The question is the first wrap, the rachis around the thread, is the first wrap what technically pushes the rachis ends up pointing after? Is it the second turn of the feather on the thread? Which actually is forcing the rachis back? The first turn?
I don't understand what you mean. Forcing it back. Well,
Yeah.
Okay, remember I told you the front side of the feather or the thread and the back side? Well, it goes to the back side and comes to the front, and that front side of the thread actually presses up against the hook, and it's what forces the rachis to the back.
But it's the very first turn that's doing that. The very first.
Both turns, and I do two turns for safety's sake because I don't want it to come apart.
Okay.
I could do three. I could do three.
or you could do one.
I've tried one. One works fine if you're gluing, but all the flies that we've submitted for judging and stuff like that, we've done this or some form of it to come up with nice small heads on the flies that we had to submit for the gold, silver, bronze. Well, not the
Now
bronze.
you tell us.
Well,
Hey,
here's the truth. I'm gonna be a little different. Al has been doing this for quite some time. I'm kind of a newbie on it. So I've only been doing it practicing it for a year.
yeah.
And I just haven't had confidence in it until the last week we've been pounding on it, and I'm feeling good about my ability to do
the
it.
thing is, wrapping materials around the thread. I mean, the other night in Dutch's presentation, he did that to keep his hackle from slipping off. We all have been wrapping thread around materials or materials around thread to make it do stuff.
And I've always done it with tinsel and wire.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're all you got to do is determine which direction you have to wrap the material around the thread to make the butt end disappear into the application just placed rather than going the other direction. Does that make any sense?
How do you think you trap more fibers by wrapping it around the feather like that?
Well, one of the things that you're going to have to develop a feel for that. But when you wrap it around the feather, you kind of give it a little wiggle, and the thread slips in between the barbs that are attached to the racus. You're not smashing them down. You're slipping in between, and you're actually tying down the stem, and the barbs are still sticking up. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is make sure that they're not pointing in the wrong direction. Sometimes you have to realign them.
So Al,
Al,
sorry.
In essence, if you're looking down at the top of the fly, you're going clockwise 2 times around the feather and then up and over.
No, counterclockwise.
No, on what I just did, I was going clockwise around the thread,
Right.
but you have to determine which direction you want the waist end to point. It don't have anything to do with clockwise and counterclockwise, because when I do, in a few minutes, I do a parachute, it gets beyond my ability to imagine which is clockwise and which is counterclockwise. Let me get this out of here. Now we can talk, all of us, instead of just us being on the... Do I need to wrap another one of these again? Or hey, I could do a peacock application, and that might show it better.
Yeah, wrap another one.
Okay, let me tie this off, and I'll get let me get some peacock here. I've got one right here.
Did you?
Yeah, it's on Facebook right there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now here is my piece of hurl, and what I'm looking for is, first off, you can see the hurl gets kind of skinny down here, where the I guess on the hurl it's still called the racus. I don't know. Anyway, the stem. I've called it the stem forever. It's the quill, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, down here it's still fairly skinny. So I am going to strip this back and then just tie that on where it starts to get a little bit bigger. I am going to use the Dutch Baughman method to wrap the peacock. And that requires a slightly different approach to it, but it's still the same. And that is wrapping your thread up against the weight of the hanging thread. And what that does is make sure that you're really pinching that peacock in pretty good. Okay, now I'm just standing here holding the the peacock. The thread's here. I am going to come around behind and to the front of the thread. That means that the waist is going to be pointed that direction. I'm going to do that again, but I kind of wiggle it so I can get right down on the racus itself. Now that's 2 turns, and now I'm just going to bring it up and over, and anchor it in place. And what we have there now is a head, and I'm just going to go break that off.
At once you twist the 2 together, then you wrap them together over the hook.
Correct.
Yes.
Absolutely. They go over together as a single unit.
But they'd have to, because they're wrapped together.
That was very helpful.
Okay, good. That's what I did. I have it all figured out in my. Okay, go ahead.
Al, why can't you wrap the thread around the hackle instead of the hackle around the thread? Does it matter?
If you come up with a way of making that happen for you, please do it. for some reason, I just can't get my brain wrapped around it. I'm able to figure out what's going to happen to my waist if I keep the waist pointing in the direction I want it to go, rather than trying to imagine what's going to
gotcha.
happen to the waist because I wrap the thread because of the thread tension.
I see what you're saying.
I think answers Susan's question. I think it does make a difference.
Okay.
Because essentially, with that technique, you're actually doing a 2-pinch loop. In the thread control world, that's called a 2-pinch loop. You're doing it without the pinch. And essentially what's happening is when you make that the first and then the second clockwise turn of thread, and then continue the thread around the hook shank, the first wrap grabs the rachis. The second wrap is what compresses it to the hook shank.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Al, could you show that one more time real quick, please?
I better go get some more hooks. Hey, this is just a learning for tonight, so we're not worried about a great entertainment thing. I'm just wanting to share something with you. So let me go get some hooks. I'll be right back.
Al, could you do it with wire? Because I think wire might show it better because it's such a small diameter.
I haven't tried it with wire. I don't see why you couldn't, but I haven't tried it. I'm going to keep doing it with thread. I'm not going to try to
No, he means to wire instead of
wire is a material.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I do that.
Okay, well, let's give it a try. What the heck? The worst thing that'll happen is I'll have to go back to
Believe
something
you don't
else.
know I don't do that. I do that. Don't, I can't believe you
That
don't.
actually
know
makes
that.
a lot of sense to me, because if you were reverse wrapping hackle towards the back of the hook, then when you wrapped the feather around the rachis, it would be pointing towards the eye, the opposite of what you did there from the front, but you could do that in the back end. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, let's let me get a piece of wire. Okay, I'll just wrap the wire. I'm not going to worry about how great the application is or anything like that, but okay, now we come around to the back of the thread and cross over the thread.
Okay.
Now we go around the thread one more time to the back of the thread, cross over the thread, wrap over together, and the wire is tied off there with the waist end poking back into the application.
So you only wrap the material and thread around the hook once, one whole revolution, not twice.
Well, it's a one full revolution with the material attached to the thread, and after that, you're just wrapping thread.
Yeah, okay, that's where I was, because I'm sitting here doing it, right? That's where I was confused. Okay.
See, and what I do different is I think about the thread going, pushing the, I don't know.
Gotta have it in your hands, huh?
The only way I was ever able to keep track of it was by leaving the thread stationary and putting the material around it. But again, I'll do another peacock and then we'll go on to the
now that first wrap. I want you to do that real slow.
Yeah, real slow.
Okay, well, one thing that I left out, I did, and I didn't even talk about it. One of the things that happens when you use a Dutch's method of wrapping this, allowing the weight of the bobbin to keep pushing the turns of pearl back, is that this thread, the gray thread, is actually just sort of hanging there under those turns until you come forward. And it's not actually around the hook. So you need to take a turn around the hook first to get that anchored around the hook. And what it does is it comes from the bottom here, up and over and down like that. Where if we had just wrapped it forward, it would be wrapped in place. Now we can go around to the front, around to the back, around to the front.
Okay, when you say the front and the back, you're talking about the front and the back of the thread.
Correct.
Okay, see that's what had me confused.
So you're bringing the feather first.
talking about the front of the feather, which is the part of the, or the front of the thread, which is the part facing you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, on the thread, I said there's the back of the thread and the front of the thread. You go to the back of the thread, you go to the front of the thread, back of the thread, front of the thread, wrap both over the hook.
Yeah.
Now you have, it's anchored in place as tight as it's going to be for the material. Now you're doing just plain thread for a head or whatever.
Yeah, okay. I'll try again.
And Al, the nice thing about this is if you do it the wrong way, your material's going to be pooching out to the front, not pooching out to the back.
You got it, man. You got it. Yeah. I only spent a month figuring the part out. You just figured it out in a couple of minutes. So all I can tell you is yes. It took me forever to figure out why in the heck is it sometimes coming out the way I want it and sometimes not the way I want it. Well, now you know.
Once around.
Gretchen, you mentioned tinsel, and do you recall last year when Eric tied a Kerry Stevens, he did the wrap in front around the tinsel? Is this in essence doing what he was doing? Remember, he kind of went backwards on the tinsel.
I don't know what you're saying. I'm not
I'm in a total loss. So I know what you're talking about, but
yeah, he was trying to keep tension on the tinsel as he tied it off up front.
Yeah, I think you're right about that as well.
Tinsel.
I remember that episode.
Yes. That's what he was doing. Exactly. Yes.
Hey, Al, I can see where that would be great value when you're doing royal wools at the before your red segment with respect to the floss.
The red space in between the two applications of Peacock, there's no little bumps at all. You can do it absolutely perfect. I'll go into the parachute part, which is really going to blow your mind because not only can you not figure right clockwise and counterclockwise, you're having to be parallel but not. I'll explain it when I get there. Maybe.
Be careful what words you use.
Okay.
Now I think I got it.
All right, we'll get this onto the vise, set that aside. And this one I haven't done any preparatory work on. We'll just go ahead and.
Well, that should be fun.
Oh yeah, I have to get to tie a whole fly tonight. Goodness gracious. I would have done that earlier today, except somebody had me in the garden working today. Oh dear, oh my aching back. Oh, that's awful here. Okay, I'm going to start about 1/3 back from the hook eye and wrap part of the way to the bend and stop. Now, slipping over to the materials, I've got some hackle here, and I want to just pull some of the barbs off of it to make a tail. Let's just see, what do we got here? Oh, that one looks good. It's not the best feather, but we're demonstrating how to do a clean tie off, not how good the feather is I'm using on the tail. Tie the tail on, and you notice the tail snuck a little bit to my side of the vise. It didn't quite, thread torque didn't quite place it the way I wanted. Well, you don't have to accept what it does to you. You can twist it and make it go where you want it to go. All right, now I'll just wrap forward to the point where I'm going to put on the wing. Now I'm getting too many feathers and stuff in front of me here, so I am going to reclamp my tail material and get it out of the way. And remember those two feathers that I set aside? Well, they'll make another set of wings for us. I need to get an even division of the fibers on one feather to another feather, and a bodkin does a good job of that. There we go. It's an even division top and bottom, and from one feather to the other. Let's get that tied in here. Pull this out to the length that I want it to be. All right, trim the waist at a severe angle so I can get a nice even taper on the body. Okay, now to strengthen these delicate barbs from a hackle feather, I need to wrap a thread base around them. And we're going to use the rebar system to do that. And the rebar system is right now when I go round and around, I'm pouring concrete. Now I'm at the top of the post area and I'm going to go straight to the hook and take a turn around there. What I've done now is the round and around is the concrete. The up and down strand is a piece of rebar. And you'll see that that is already much stronger now that I'm putting in concrete pouring the other direction. I happen to have a cement mixer that will pour concrete one way and then the other way. You think I'm kidding you? Yeah, well, I am. Then I just put in another piece of rebar.
I've got some place I'd like some concrete.
Don't even think about it. And I'll pour some more concrete here and put in another strand of rebar. And we'll just leave that the way it is for right now. But that's pretty strong and it'll support a parachute hackle. And what I want to do is crisscross between the feathers to divide those wings. And I've added 4 more strands of rebar. They're just kind of gently laying in there. If you want to zoom in real close, you can see that they're crisscrossed there. And when I put some more wraps around them, some more concrete, it'll just be additional rebar strengthening that. Thank you, Gretchen. All right. Now let's just get back here and I'm going to tie on another piece of this yarn. I've had fun with this yarn for years, so I'll do another one of these.
And Red Heart is not the only yarn you can use if you want wool, depending on what material you want.
Any of those materials are going to work just fine.
Whatever's on sale at Joanne Fabric.
That's just about it. And I think we got most of this for about 98 cents a skein. It's
a long time ago. It's a long time ago.
Well, okay, well, but you buy a skein of this stuff and it does last a long time. And the fact that we bought this 30 years ago doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, but I think Joanne's is going to business now.
Yeah.
Okay, let me find a hackle feather here. Go up here and mute that one. All right, now we're going to add our last piece of rebar before we finish up with the concrete. And that last piece of rebar is actually going to be the stem of the feather. So we've got all kinds of rebar supporting this this wing setup here. I kind of got things messed up.
Yeah, you do.
That's all right. I'll pull it out of the way, get it out of my way. Get
Al,
this. Okay, there we go.
Al, this is Bill. I've got a question.
Just a sec. I'm in the middle of something I can't quit. Okay, now I'm going to capture that. And now I'll come back down and I'm binding that hackle in place.
Okay, what
okay, your question, Bill.
Yes, sir. Is it the rebar forcing the thread down and then tightening it on itself? I'm just curious. I'm trying to. I think it is. I don't know. It's just a,
the round and around is forcing the up and down tight in there, the rebar, and it sets up and strengthens everything. See how sturdy that is after putting the rebar in? But it takes both the rebar and the concrete. It takes the round and around and the up and down. You'll never get it with just one. You can do a pretty good job of just wrapping around and around the parachute post, but it'll never be as strong as half the number of round and round turns if you throw in some rebar. Same way as it is in concrete. Anyhow, so let me get up front here, and I'll just wrap the body. Remember how we kind of give this a twist to, wait a minute, I better get rid of these wings. The waste from these wings are kind of getting in my way. It's going to be a hassle. And I'll again put those in a clamp to. All right, there we go. Now I'll have to give it another twist to make those line up. Now I'm going to anchor the, I knew there had to be another barb in there somewhere, because if there was one tore out in the back, there's got to be one in the front. Now I'm going to go around the post, and I usually let it hang behind the post when I'm doing a parachute. On this, you don't. You'll see why here in a minute. It's got to come around to the front of the post. Okay, now I'm going to wrap my parachute hackle. All right, now we're going to do the same thing as before, except we have to remember now. Let's see. The thread is going to go around the post, and we want the waist that we're going to manage. We want the waist to point up so that it's hidden in the wraps. So let me make sure that I remember which way to do it. I got to come around.
Well, I went around it with the thread before. This time he's moving the hackle.
There we go. Went around the thread again. And I did mess that up right there. I got a couple of strands. But what that does is anchor that in place then again for you. And then we usually just pull ours forward to do a half hitch and whip finish at the eye. However, you could just as easily do a whip finish on the post.
Not as easy.
But anyway, what I like about this is that the waist sticks up in the wrapped application, and you don't have any stubs sticking down here on the bottom.
Yeah, have everybody muted because we were getting some crosstalk. So if you need to ask a question, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, and we'll get back to the discussion area, remove the spotlight, and any questions or comments or whatever.
Al, I just learned something. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. I see a lot of applications for that.
That's okay. I'm coming to the most important part of tonight's presentation. Is I've done one thing. I've kind of showed you that you got to manage your waist and point it in the direction you want to hide it. That's all I've done. Everything else has been done by every one of you at one time or another. What I'm looking for is feedback from you all on, okay, what do you do with this? Where do you go from here? All I know how to do right now is to do ostrich, peacock, and hackle. There's got to be a bunch of other applications that would work really well, and I just haven't thought of. And that's where all you come into the picture. And we'll publish them in Fly Tire magazine if we get enough of them. And we always give you credit when we get an item from you and we publish it in Fly Tire. Your name is on it. We're just the ones that type up the tip.
It begs a question about doing peacock quill or whatever, or just the rakas where you've stripped all the fibers off. And what would happen with that? That would still, it would go aft, but it wouldn't be underneath the, if you like a quill body, for instance.
Well, if it was all stripped, you probably want to go right back to your old method of doing it. All we're doing here is figuring out how to hide
because you're gonna have other things on top of that butt end anyway. It's not at the eyes.
You cover up this. The main place you run into trouble with dry fly hackle is tying off with the head. And the reason I mention this is I have been an evaluator for the FFI awards scheme since day one. And I cannot tell you how many points I've had to downgrade on an absolutely gorgeous fly because there was trash in the head or somewhere, but in the head more than anything.
Yeah.
Now, this particular scheme or whatever you want to call this system that I present tonight, technique won't do a single thing for straightening up a hair wing tied at the eye. You're going to have to figure out how to do a good job on that. This only really helps with, as I say, peacock, ostrich, and hackle, and whatever you
What did
dream
you
of.
just say?
Peacock, ostrich.
No, it wouldn't do any good on what?
If you do a hair wing at the front of the hook, you're going to have to figure out how to make that look good yourself. This won't do a thing for you.
Yeah.
And it's also, you see that
I'm sorry. Don't you usually put hackle in front of the hair?
some of the times you put on the hackle first and put the last thing that goes on is the wing over at the very front on, especially on a wet fly or a streamer.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking dry fly.
Yeah, okay, not a dry fly, but
You can use.
It's got a way of hiding that on a hair wing, Al.
I'm sorry, what?
Said Mike Kelly has a way of hiding that on a hair wing. You know, when he twists the fibers. Oh no, I'm sorry. He's using I'm sorry, never mind. He's using poly yarn.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Al.
Yeah.
Hair wings, sometimes the easiest way to get a nice small head is to learn to pre-cut and pre-glue and then pre-cut.
I've seen that tip of yours and it works great. Between your tip and the one from Jerry Chris on trimming on the bottom instead of on the top, I get some awfully good looking hackle platforms to work with using one or the other.
Yeah.
One thing I would mention on the hair wing, I mentioned before what you were doing was the 2-pinch loop technique. If you had a bundle of hair and you held that bundle above the hook shank, place your thread in a pinch wrap, go around the material, but go around a second time and then around the hook shank. And when you pull straight up, the first wrap compresses the hair, the bundle of hair.
Gotcha.
The second wrap compresses it onto the hook shank. So you end up with it right on top of the hook shank and a very small tie-in spot.
I'm going to have to play with that. That's I hadn't thought about that. Okay, that's the kind of feedback I'm looking for, and in written form is always better because I guarantee you, I couldn't tell you what I had for dinner 30 minutes ago, let alone what I'm going to remember tomorrow morning. I mean, that's no joke. No joking aside, that's just the way an old man's memory is. But when I get it on a piece of paper and read it, I don't tend to forget it as much. So
Plus, Dutch, I'd like to watch you do that.
I would love that. I would love that. Yes.
So maybe you could come prepared some Friday night to do that on camera. Is that possible?
Well, we sure could. I could do it and make pictures of it and send that to you so you could.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, so that we could do it on a screen share. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and you could look at it and take your time to really study it instead of just watching it during a demonstration.
Yeah, because
and then I could practice it.
It happens really fast in a demonstration, and in pictures, especially if there's enough pictures showing it, you can visualize it as you step from one to the next to the next. Yeah, good idea.
Thank you. That would be super.
That would be awesome. Anyway,
so Al, I have a question.
Okay, I'm here to answer them. You bet.
So when you do this technique, normally when I catch a hackle, I wrap it 3 times before I trim it. So when you do this, you're really only catching the hackle once.
Twice.
Okay, I guess there are 2 wraps around it. And
yeah.
you've done this because I'm about to tie 8 dozen little tiny 16 and 18 parachute style sulfur emergers. And you don't have any more trouble with them. You think this is as secure as wrapping 3 times around the rachis before you cut it?
Yeah,
The
I
old,
mean,
you know,
it's-
the traditional style.
it is because your strand is interwoven with the barbs on the racus.
Yeah.
You're just tying them down, crunching them down the best you can. Once in a while, you'll get it down where you get straight down and it's in amongst them, but you're actually working your way through a short section of racus and barbs with the thread worked into it. So I think it's stronger. And I know that if you put a little bit of health on your thread, you're in good shape.
So would it be safer to do the rake is 3 times around the thread? Is there any harm in doing it instead of just 2?
Do it and find out. I've always found 2 did it for me, and I just figured it no reason to do more. But hey, if 3 works, please let me know. Let me see how I want to know how this works for you guys. This is except for we've been using this for years, but not really. It's just one of those tricks that you kind of dig into and then don't.
Dutch, do you think 3 times would make a difference?
It doesn't help, Gretchen, and the reason why is the first 2 loops, when you tighten those, they tighten onto the bundle and the hook shank side by side. When you do a 3rd loop, it goes over top of the 2nd loop. And the second, it doesn't tighten it any tighter.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
2 loops really does it. But I'll tell you the other thing, Al, we might need to ask Barry or somebody with an engineering mind, but I've always thought when I've done this 2 pinch loop method on any material, I've always thought that when I tighten that thread straight up, I'm actually half hitch.
You're muted there, Dutch. You got cut out a little bit.
Okay, let me try that again.
Yes.
Where are we? Let me find it here.
You're good. Oops, now you're muted. There, good.
We might need to ask Barry or somebody that sees the world through engineers' lenses, but I've always thought that when I do that 2 loop method, that you're actually tightening the material using a half hitch.
I don't see how that is because the thread is not twisted around itself.
Yes, it is. The second loop, when you do the first loop, it's not. The second loop creates the twist as you would have in a half hitch.
Yep.
Sure.
But it's well, maybe.
I don't know.
You're just gonna have to do it, Sue, and watch yourself.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Sometimes you just can't visualize that stuff.
Right,
You gotta see it.
Just take
Okay,
some
now,
twine and a
once-
pheasant feather. That takes some twine and a pheasant feather and do it large scale, macro. See what it does.
Yeah.
Anything else before we head on into the tip or anything like that?
I have to watch this a couple of times and play with the vise while I'm watching it.
Yep.
But one of the things about the video, I'll have the video on this posted tomorrow, or you can go to YouTube or go to Facebook tonight and watch it there. But I'll have it posted tomorrow, and you can always start to work your way through with a video to see what you need to see.
Yeah, makes a difference.
Yep, lots of time starting and stopping.
Well, I
sorry.
think what Dutch might be saying is if you make the 2 loops and the second loop is in front of the first loop, it's not going to cross over. But if it's on top of or crossing over that first loop, that's where you get that twist, and that's where you get that similar to a half hitch.
Yeah. Okay, tip time.
Anyway, tip time, and I'll be looking forward to the emails. By the way, let's get up here. Okay, getting ready to go into the tip, but I'll be looking for the emails from you all with pictures of what you've done and ideas. You know, one other thing too, I used the terminology from the telephone company, the tie wrap, and I would really like to have this called something other than tie wrap because just terminology I use as the next cable splicer. So if you come up with a good name, please.
The owl wrap. The owl wrap.
Yeah, the
No,
Beatty
we're
wrap.
not going to. No.
Well, but it already
it should
has
be
a
the
name,
hidden
doesn't
wrap.
it? what about the name that
Dutch called
Dutch
it
called it?
the double what? What was that again, Dutch?
Double pinch loop.
The two pinch
double
loop
pinch loop.
or the double pinch loop.
Got it.
Now,
Double.
I
how about
think
the,
it should be the, I think it should be the hidden
I better
wrap.
I better write that down.
yeah, the
No,
stub
no,
hider
no.
wrap.
I mean, we might have a name if we've already got a name.
We have a name. What's the name?
Double pinch wrap,
Okay.
double loop pinch
loop.
wrap.
Well, but I think you ought to get the word material into that, because the real point of this is you're capturing the material with the thread. So it's the 2-pinch material.
It's a double pinch loop. It's been
Two
working for-
pinch material loop. How's that?
I think,
Two
Yeah.
pinch stub
I think
hider.
a hidden wrap.
I can tell you what, you've got me so confused right now. I won't remember anything. I wrote it down.
Suggestions.
Send your suggestions, lbd2@gmail, and I've got down double pinch loop. That's the only thing I'm going to remember. I'm sorry. I'm not that I'm trying to not listen to some of you folks, but like I said, I won't remember. If I don't come down and look at that message, I won't even remember that in the morning. So
This is why we
Alan?
don't use committees for design work.
Boy, good man. I love that, Barry. That's right on.
You know what they say, a camel's a horse designed by committee, so.
Yeah.
Al, let me
That's
ask
exactly
one.
right.
I was on a lot of committees in the telephone business, and so I have
Oh,
to
man.
agree.
No kidding. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, we'll go on to tonight's
Al.
tip. Oh, hello.
If you don't mind, this is David.
Yeah.
Chuck was starting to ask about wrapping quill body. And my question would be, like on a red quill, would this method keep that last wrap more snug to the rear versus a lot of times you create a gap on that last wrap when you try to secure the quill to the hook?
Yeah.
I think
And
it
would this help you out with quill
I know.
applications?
I can visualize exactly what you're asking me. I'm going to have to try it. I had an immediate thought that if we use this to do the first half of the loop, which would cause it to go in tight like you're talking about, then take the waist end and give it a bend and wrap it the traditional way, what you end up with is a really tight application, I think.
Because you don't really want it poking back.
You don't want to put it back because it's all bare quill. I mean, on a quill body.
So you've got
Yeah,
to,
but you don't want that gap. You want it flush against the last wrap.
but
correct.
what you'd want is for it to poke forward.
When I do that, I
That's
don't have a
right.
gap because I go further than I know I have to.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I do
So
too.
that
Yeah,
so
you cover it up.
that the thorax is and the hackle wraps are over that.
Yeah.
That area
Yeah,
that
that's
would
what I
have
do
that
too.
gap.
Yep. Yeah, we cover stuff up with the next material, whatever it might be.
Okay,
Okay, are we ready to go to the tip, or do we have more questions? Okay, to the tip we go then. Well, folks, the tip tonight is going to be about hooks and hints. And just coming right back there, the hooks and the hints. What happened to us last week, Peggy Brenner did an absolutely stellar job of presenting a Rangeley Streamer on a really long shank hook. I got more emails from people this last week asking me where in the heck can I get those long hooks? And of course, I'd look them up, and you can find them in England and in various places here in the United States. And they're not $1 a piece, but awful darn close to it. Pretty expensive is what I'm trying to say. Well, I've come up with something that might be an option for at least a person who wants to play a little bit. And what I'm going to do is, this is from the bait casting store. Now, don't be asking me how I know what goes on in the bait casting store, but we have one down the street. And they have Eagle Claw and several other brands, and this one was Pro Striker. And I want you to notice that it's a size 4, and it's a 415-004, meaning it's a model number 415. and it's a size 4. What I want you to notice here, though, let me get my pointer. What I want you to notice is that Pro Striker size 4 is the same size as a size 6 in our 3X long dry fly hooks or wet fly hooks. This is a 6 right here, and this is a 4 in that Pro Striker, but we've got a shank that goes out to Jesus. It's well, this is a 3X long shank right here on the regular stuff that we tie with, and this is one of the Pro Strikers. So at least it would give you a longer shank to practice on if you didn't want to pay a buck a hook to do it. That's all I'm saying. And that's the only tip. Now the hint tonight, in fact, I'll take this hook over to the vise real quick so you can see it. You take this out, and well, in fact, it's so doggone long that if I put it in the vise,
that's that Carlisle hook.
this is the Pro Striker
Pro
hook.
Striker, I'm sorry.
And is it as much as Peggy was tying on? She was on 10X, and I think this is pretty close to 6. I mean, the sizes and stuff in the bait casting world don't seem to be even close to the same as it is in the fly tying world. But anyway, that's a good long shank for you to play with the concept. And then if you decide you like it and you want to get into tying them, then you can go from there. But now let's go back to a couple of hints. First off, one of the things that was really helpful tonight, and that I didn't talk to you about, is I have here a couple of packages that I got at the Bass Pro Shop. So I guess I do know where the bait place is. Anyway, and what these are is lead weights. This is 1/4 ounce, what they're called drop weight. And it's a drop weight. I guess it's somehow they bounce it along the bottom so that the bait is up off the bottom. And here's another one. It's a 3/16, and that one's 1/4. Well, what I found that I didn't tell you about earlier is that I have lead weights in my bobbins for doing this double pinch loop, whatever the thing is. And that really helps having a little bit of extra weight there to hold that bobbin in place. So you do with whatever you want to. Now, the last thing I want to get into is, again, I got a whole bunch of comments on another program that we did about feather sources. And so I went on Amazon just to see what I could get off of Amazon, because everybody was saying that there's a terrible shortage of feathers and they can't get decent tying feathers. I don't know, but off of Amazon here is turkey wing feathers, and I got 20 of them for $14.99. And I have to admit that they're not even lefts and rights. I got 13 rights and 7 lefts. And in looking at the feathers that I have here, I figure I got about 6 really good right and left combinations. Now that's for 15 bucks. And I haven't got into this one yet. This is $7.69 for a gob of goose shoulder feathers, and there's a few wing feathers in there, but looks to me like there's some shoulder feathers too. Anyway, don't know how they're going to be to marry with or anything like that. I'll be playing with them over the next weeks, and I'll let you know. But anyway, that was $7.69. So there are feathers out there, but whether they're good enough to serve our needs, I don't know. I can tell you these right here, the turkey, there's many a time I would have died to get stuff this good to tie muddlers with. And this is the perfect muddler feathers right here. Back to us. Before we go any further, any questions on the tip?
That one bag looks like it came from Hobby Lobby, the colored one.
It came from Amazon, but I would suspect that the supplier is the same to all of them. I mean, there's a lot of places also have an online store with Amazon, and then they have a retail store too. I mean, so I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing you might
like that. What's that?
One thing you might want to try is to take those colored feathers and put them on a wet paper towel and see if the color bleeds. Because sometimes the feathers you buy in craft stores don't have color waterproof dye necessarily, like they're not dyed to the.
Have you ever tried to set them with some vinegar?
Now that may work. What I was talking to was just trying to use some of those, and then when I get them wet, I find out that the color just bleeds into the other colors, and then like on a Parmesan bell, the red and white would kind of turn into some kind of an ugly pink. And
I just know that like with a sweatshirt, if you buy a new sweatshirt, if you give it a little bath in some vinegar and water and let it sit for a bit, sometimes it helps set that dye and your color will stay better longer. So I was just thinking that might work with feathers. I don't know.
That's also what we did when we were dyeing fur and feathers and stuff, Gretchen. We always did we did acetic acid, but acetic acid and vinegar are very similar.
I used acid when I was dyeing stuff.
Correct. Yeah, acetic acid.
I used vinegar.
Oh, okay. We used it somewhere else in.
What proportion do you mix, Gretchen? I mean, how much vinegar to how much water?
I've got a formula. I'd have to go look.
I use 50-50 for clothing.
50-50?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do, white vinegar, which is acetic acid, I believe.
Vinegar is a 5% acetic acid solution.
The stronger I like it pretty strong. Let's put it that way. So I think mine is pretty close to that. The formula I use actually came from Peter Vineyard. His dyeing instructions are the instructions I use, and I can't remember if I got those online or if I got them direct from Peter. Or when we visited him, I don't remember. But anyway, I think when you order dye from Peter Vineyards, you probably get instructions.
Probably when we were at the factory, because we watched him do all the dyeing.
Yeah, I just don't remember.
Thank you.
Strong solution is like a cup to a quart of water.
Okay.
And
that sounds good.
And I know when Rich Youngers did the dyeing, we would use less than that. We would use something like a tablespoon to a quart, or maybe 2 tablespoons to a quart. Well, and then you do the dye when in the hot water. You just have to be careful. Never add an acid to the water. Add the water to the acid.
Okay.
Add the acid to the water like you water. Because if you put the reverse and that water is hot, you'll end up having the mix of the acid and water generates heat. And if you mix them the wrong way, you end up with super hot water, which splatters all over. So just be careful.
Gotcha.
I generally mix it all and then heat it.
With vinegar, you're not going to really have much trouble because it is one of the weakest acids. And
I use salt.
If there's nothing more in relation to the tip, let's go to the sharing so we can continue chatting.
Well, 2 things. If you know any knitters, talk to them about getting their end pieces of yarn. You can come up with a lot of colors and some really neat things. There's some bamboo yarn and other stuff. Make some nice bodies. And Wholesale Fly Company has some 4X long streamer hooks. You could ask Matt how long they are for things.
Okay. Yes, there's all kinds of longer ones out there. By the way, I didn't tell you the price on these because I'm not trying to undercut our fly shops. I don't want to do that. But they were less expensive than the ones in the fly shops. But they also aren't the same thing. They're from the bait store. And who knows how well they'll last or whether they'll straighten out on the first fish or they're brittle. I don't know anything about them. 100/180.
So, you know how your hands often are like sandpaper, and it is a pain when you're tying because your fingers catch your materials.
Yeah.
So I say fight sandpaper with sandpaper. So what these are is for manicures, I guess. I don't know. I've never gone to I've never had a pedicure or a manicure, but it's 100 grit on one side and 180 on the other, and they're washable. I mostly just use the 180, and you can just rub it on your fingers, and it takes off all the rough.
Love that.
And then
Where did you get
I was going to say, what did you call that thing?
It's a manicure, waterproof, a professional waterproof file. And I don't even remember how I came across the first one, but then I found them on Amazon. And this one, you can see the brand there. I don't know, maybe it's backwards. I don't know. It's MAKARTT, but there are other brands. So I think if you just go on Amazon or to a beauty shop and look for professional washable manicure files, and I use them fairly commonly, especially after I've been fishing. You get all sandpapery hands, so it really helps.
Okay, well, anyway, I've got that one written down. I got 2 things on my list now that I won't forget for tomorrow.
Okay.
Gardening makes our hands a little.
Everything does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Wow.
That is a hook that is for the Carrie Stevens. And one of the differences that you will notice is right here, when you look at that Carlisle bend, it is more rounded. And this has the Limerick style.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Carrie Stevens streamers were tied on the Limerick bend. So even though you may get the length of the hook using some of those Carlisle bends, you won't quite get the same shape. But,
Jim, where'd you get that? Where'd you get that hook? What is it?
I got it out of this box that somebody gave me of hooks for Carrie Stevens. And I got another one that Ted Niedermeyer gave me that were actually old Carrie Stevens flies that were so damaged that he stripped off the fly material and saved the hook for retying. And I do have up here someplace a bunch of hooks that now these aren't cheap. For 10, they're the extra long Bartlett blind eye. And unfortunately, Bartlett is no longer making some of these hooks.
Yeah.
If you can find a fly shop that has them, buy them and get them up. This was a size 1/0 blind eye extra long Bartlett, and those its reference is HE2.
Was that partridge?
Yes, partridge of reddish, but they are the Bartlett hook. They're discontinuing from what I've heard. Now this package of 10 hooks was $11.95. So you're looking at almost $1.20 a hook.
Yep.
So Jim, how long is that hook that's in your vise? I mean, in inches.
Yeah, well, that's what I held up.
It was 2.5 inches when he held the
2.5.
Yeah, it's 2.5 inches.
Okay.
And I've got some others laying around here too, someplace, or that
Jeez.
are
somehow I'm not surprised.
The only person in the whole world other than us that has more than one room full of fly tying materials is Jim Ferguson.
So Jim, you're going to kill me, but when I joined the Atlantic Guild, I didn't want to tie on blind eye hooks, and I gave a whole package of those away to one of the other people. The blind eyes. They're very
Yeah,
cheap.
yeah.
Oh dear.
And I make my own hooks, so I could make some, but they would be time-wise, it takes a while.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else that anybody wants to share or talk about?
I just want to thank you guys. I love the tips. These things are almost better than tied flies to me.
Oh, good.
This was great today. Thank you, Al.
Okay, I was playing around. People are playing around. With the double back foam. Sticky on one side, and I figured on what the heck, I can actually attach fibers to the foam, and now I've got a skirt. And so this happens to be craft fur. So this is a way I can use craft fur, and then I can use the sticky ends to attach to the hook because it doesn't come loose. I found that part out. And so, if you're really worried about it, you just run a dot of UV cure down the center, but then now you've created a skirt. I've done deer hair to it and everything else, and that worked. And then from a tip that you gave, remember that Mueller Pro tape? Well, if this is all you got and you don't want to double stack your sticky backed foam, just put the Mueller tape on the sticky side, and you can do different colors. You can mix and match, and then you can cut it and make it different.
Good tip. Thank you, Bill.
Hey, Al.
Yes.
Cabela's has a mustad. They call it, what do they call it? Heritage Streamer hook that is a 7XL.
Oh, wow.
And looks like they've got them in stock, $6.99. You can only get it up to size 2, but that's still a pretty good size Carrie Stevens. And looks like they're $6.99 for 10 of them.
Oh, that's
Cabela's?
Yeah.
Cabela's, yeah.
But do a search under the mustad. What I did is just did a mustad 9XL, and I got all kinds of hits, not on 9XLs, but I got a lot of 7XLs.
Sure. Yeah.
And the place I've ordered mine from before, but I just looked and it appears they're out of stock, is Daddy Flies. Joe Fox has traditionally carried some 9Xs, but looks like he's out of stock at the moment.
Sure. Well, that's it for this week, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time.